Welcome to But Enough About Me, a podcast about other people. My name is Tyler Andrews. I'm a Nashville-based photographer, husband, and father. I'm trying to collect the stories of everyone around me, whether we're best friends or total strangers. I want to know what made you the person you are today. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. I want to say on the front end, real quickly, I have stickers of the podcast logo, and I would love to share them with you. If you would like one of these stickers, they're vinyl, they're really nice. They go on bumpers, they go on laptops, they go on whatever is going to be seen publicly, and that's the goal, is tell other people about the podcast. But they're free, so all you have to do is send me your address, and I will make sure it gets to you. It costs you nothing. I'll even pay for the stamp, because we're just that kind of show. Okay, enough of that. Today's show is from another friend that I made when I was shooting weddings ages ago. I was honored to photograph her wedding with her and her husband, Derek. Derek's a good dude, loves cameras as well, so clearly he had the good taste to hire me. She works in digital marketing for a major auto manufacturer. She has 4 kids. You'll hear all about it in the episode. I'll stop talking. She does a much better job than I do. It is my privilege to introduce you to my friend, Amy Atkin. Well, I guess it won't be a first, but...
Yeah, but it's different, which
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
I was born in a very small town in Michigan.
Okay.
We lived in a town called Columbiaville, Michigan. So my family had been there before the town was even a town. Kind of all of my ancestry goes back to that town, and I still have relatives that live there.
That's cool. What part of Michigan is that in?
So if this was a video, I would show you on my hand,
Yep.
right? In
Yep.
a very cheesy way.
That's the way it works.
But a lot of people, I think, now know where Flint, Michigan's at. So it's east of Flint, Michigan, about half an hour east.
Very cool. And you said they were there before there was a town. So how many generations back are we talking?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I think we've traced it back to my great-grandmother's father. Mm-hmm.
Great-grandmother's father.
Mm-hmm.
So great-great-grandfather?
Mm-hmm.
Goodness gracious. It's probably early 1800s?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's about right.
That's super cool.
Isn't that neat?
It's neat to have that much history in one place that you know you're tied into.
It is, but when you're growing up, you don't appreciate it till you're a whole lot older.
This is true. This is true. What? Tell me about your family, your folks.
So, my dad was born in the same place and grew up there. And my mom was kind of all over the place. So,
Okay.
my dad kind of had the all-American household. So, grandma and grandpa worked. Both of them, actually.
I was just going to say both of them worked.
Yeah, they both worked, which is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually both worked for General Motors and both retired from there, which I think is pretty unique from my grandmother's standpoint at that time.
When were you born?
I was born in 1972.
Okay, so your grandparents would have been, I mean, that would have been like World War II era.
Mm-hmm. Yep, my
Awesome.
grandfather was actually in World War II. So
Is that what, I mean, do you know why your grandmother started working in the first place? Is that what happened?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think I would imagine that's probably the case.
She was Rosie Riveter.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty neat, huh?
Okay, all right, sorry.
So my dad worked for General Motors too.
Okay.
In skilled trades, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom for quite a while, and then she went back. I remember when she went back and got her GED.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really cool, very proud moment for my mom. And then she went on to beauty school, I guess they called it at the time. So she ran her own beauty salon for a good number of years in one of the local towns. But I remember her doing that too and graduating and that being a really big deal.
That's cool. How old were you when that happened, if you remember it?
I want to say I was around 5.
Okay.
That might be a little bit wrong. But
Close
I
enough.
want to say it was one of my earlier memories of her being at night school and finishing that up.
How many siblings do you have?
I have one brother.
Okay. Where, older, younger?
He's older, so he was kind of a war baby, if you will. So he was born while my dad was over at Vietnam, and I think my parents still have the newspaper clipping, they spelled his name wrong.
Nice.
So my dad was like, "Wait, what?" Right, right. And they may have gotten the date wrong too. I'm not quite sure, but there were a couple errors in it.
Oh
So,
my
it turns into one
gosh.
of those things. And I remember my mom telling me about the first time my dad, met his son, and he was still in service when he met him.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
How old was your brother at that point when they first met?
a really little, months
Yeah.
old.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it wasn't like he was gone for 9 months
no.
after the birth.
Mm-mm.
Okay, it was even so.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Uh-huh. So my mom lived with my dad's parents.
Okay.
They were married,
Yeah.
and they were married before my brother came along. So I remember that being kind of like, whatever, a running joke that I don't think my parents thought was too funny, but he was he was born, well before, or they were married well before he was born. And I remember my mom saying what a struggle, because she wrote my dad every day.
Wow.
Yeah,
Every day.
every day. Yeah. And he would send her back pictures, and he bought her these beautiful photo albums.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
In Vietnam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind of an odd thing. And she has a couple pieces of jewelry that he bought as
Yeah.
well, which again is kind of an odd thing, but you do what you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how often was he able to write back?
Um, I think pretty often. I mean, she has quite the collection of photos and stuff from him. So
That's amazing.
yeah, yeah. But she was, gosh, she had me when she was 20.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So she was not quite 18 when she had my brother.
Okay.
Yeah, so my dad was
So you're both young.
21,
Yeah.
really young. And I look at my soon to be 20-year-old son and think, oh my goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did your dad do after the war? Did he have issues coming back or?
Yeah, so he doesn't really like to talk about it. It took and of course I wouldn't know the difference, right? Because I wasn't around quite yet. But
Sure.
everything that I've heard was that my dad was very carefree, and he was kind of like always the prankster, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, kind
Mm-hmm.
of growing up and whatnot. And he was definitely a changed man when he came back. I think that weighed on him a lot. He was exposed to a lot.
Yeah.
And he just didn't like to talk about it. It was really taboo back then, right? To have any conversation about what you've seen, or what you were exposed to, or kind of what happened. So good number of years he didn't talk at all about it. We sat down while I was going through my divorce many
Mm-hmm.
years later and had a wonderful conversation until 4 o'clock in the morning
Wow.
about it. And it was I remember it being the first time that he opened up. We kind of had a strained relationship up until then, and that was the moment that like kind of turned it all around for the two of us.
Wow. I want to hear about that when we get there. So tell me about elementary school.
So elementary school was, remember I lived in a really small town. I
Yeah.
grew up in a small town, so
Yeah.
everybody knew everybody's grandparents and aunts and uncles, right? Like they all lived in this small town. I want to say the population was about 800.
Nice.
Yeah. So
That is officially small.
very small. So there was an elementary school in town,
Okay.
and it's the only thing that was in the town was the elementary school. So years and years ago, it used to be the high school as well, and they turned it into just an elementary, and then we all fed. There were like 4 towns that fed into a high school, right?
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, so that got weird too, right?
Yep.
But it was wonderful. I mean, really wonderful. My parents were very, very engaged.
Yeah.
So my mom and dad were very involved in the Boy Scouts. And my mom was really involved in the Girl Scouts and very involved in school. And so anytime there was like anything that was needed in terms of like, hey, we're having a bake sale, my mom would always do that. And my dad was, he was a coach for the Little League for a
Mm-hmm.
while for my brother. So very, very much involved in the town and in my growing up. Now, the funny thing is, in elementary school, my brother actually had one of my dad's teachers in, in elementary school. Yeah,
I
which
guess that happens when you live in
yeah,
that tiny of a town for
it
that many generations.
it sure does, and it's funny because I think she remembered my dad, and so certainly had an impression on my brother.
Oops.
Yeah, so it was really, it was really wonderful. It's one of those, everybody knows everybody, and oh, that's so and so's kid, and that's so and so's kid, and whatnot.
Kind of
So
idyllic small town America.
it
And I guess in the
was.
70s, the automotive industry was still booming
Hmm.
in Michigan.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Very
So
cool.
there were a lot of like festivals in the summertime. We had what we called Columbiaville Days.
Nice.
So they'd always have, and it's exactly what you think it would be: pie eating contest and greased
Yes.
pig catching
Oh my
contests. Oh
gosh.
yeah, and bike rallies.
Oh, that's fantastic. What kind of pies? What see now? Because I think this is very regional.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of pies did you guys have?
Cherry and apple.
I knew it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So you're in this tiny elementary school. Do you remember how many people roughly were in the class?
Oh boy, maybe 20.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
And how many first grade classes were there?
Gosh, not many. Maybe two or three.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to build an annex on at one point for all of the third grade
No.
classes, and there were three classes in there, three classrooms in there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big, bold move.
That is yeah, that's impressive. Uh Middle school in the same building?
No, so middle school actually was next to the high school.
Okay.
So we had to go to another town. It was a neighboring town.
Did you guys all bus over
Uh
there?
huh.
Or?
Yeah,
Nice.
so it was a very long bus ride. Very long.
How early? Do you remember how early you had to get up to be at the bus stop?
I don't think it was bad because I was that kid that was always late. So I think my mom drove me more than I rode the bus, to be honest with you. I was that kid. So I don't know, like 8 o'clock, I was,
Oh, that's not
I'd
bad.
get up and put myself together and try to make the bus.
That's not bad. What did you? So you said you were in Girl Scouts,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I assume your brother was in Boy Scouts. You said
Hmm.
mentioned Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
I don't know the Girl Scouts. How high did you make it in that?
So I went to fifth grade
Okay.
and then I think fourth or fifth grade,
Uh huh.
and then kind of stopped from there. I um, started to discover music and get into that a little more. And then in my middle school years, I got into cheerleading and those kinds of things. So different kind of activities, but certainly always active. And then my brother was about the same,
Yeah.
fourth or fifth grade. And then he discovered motocross racing, and that became a thing for our family.
That
Yes.
that can steal a heart.
Hmm.
That's fantastic. Tell me about home life, because your dad worked at GM. Your mom was a stylist. So when you got home from school, was mom there? What did it look like?
So when I was younger, she was there.
Okay.
But I'd say, I don't know, gosh, about seventh grade, maybe sixth,
Okay.
seventh grade.
Mm-hmm.
She was at work, and she worked till 5 every day. So we get home, and then my dad would get home about 3:30 because he worked the early shift. So my brother and I would get home, and then we'd be home for maybe, I don't know, 45 minutes, and then my dad would show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever get in any trouble before that 45
A
minutes
whole
ended?
lot. So
Yeah.
we would spend a lot of time, kind of hiding in our room. We didn't do it, sort of thing, right? Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I need stories. Tell me about this. What did you
So,
do?
my brother and I, we argued a lot. So it was
Okay.
a lot of that kind of stuff where,
Okay.
oh, I didn't break mom's, glass swan off the bathroom wall. That was him. And no, it wasn't. And yes, it was. And I'm hiding. And, yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah. But I think my dad was really stressed out during those years.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like, my brother and I were starting to become teenagers. So there was a lot of like, we're kind of disengaging, and we were arguing at the time and not getting along at all.
Yeah.
And then, kind of throw my dad into that mix, and, it wasn't a very good dynamic. I think the three of us just tried to hold on till my mom got home, right? Because she was always the peacemaker.
I think my kids feel the same way most of the time.
No, I think so too. Yeah, I have that same dynamic going on. And again, you don't appreciate it till you're much older, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you became a cheerleader.
I did.
That's a different shift.
So it was. I like to say that I had quite the identity crisis growing up, and it's never kind of gone away. So I was actually in band and in cheerleading.
Okay.
And we can talk about the how that affected me in high school
Yes, please.
in a bit. But I joined cheerleading in seventh grade. It just seemed like a fun thing to do and a way to kind of hang out and be social. And so I had to quickly learn rules about basketball and football,
Yeah.
to say the least. Not quite ever sure I ever grasped them, but it was a lot of fun, and it was very much it was very physical. So it was a way like I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd just be tired, which
Yeah.
is good for me.
What was your brother doing? You said he got into motocross.
Hmm.
How much time of the families was spent with that? Is that a weekend thing?
So that was a lot of time, particularly in the summer. So I will tell you a story. I could not tell you how old I was, probably 13 or 14, maybe. We had one of those campers that you put on the back of a truck.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Pull behind.
No, on top of the truck, in the bed of the truck.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, one of those
Yeah.
from the 70s.
Yeah.
So we loaded that up. We put a trailer with my brother's motorcycles on the back, and we drove from Michigan to Oklahoma in July.
That's a long drive.
In July.
How did the air conditioning work in the truck?
Okay, it was all right, and we had an air conditioner in the little camper thing,
Sure.
and thank goodness we were able to plug that in. But I remember that as I don't think I went down once to see my brother race because it was just too incredibly hot and I wasn't interested. So there was a local shuttle that would pick you up and take you to a water park. So
Oh,
every day
wow.
I would bum $10 off my parents and go to the water park all day. I had a phenomenal tan.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Were you allowed to ride in the camper while it was driving?
I don't think it was legal,
Okay.
but we did it.
Right. Because I was trying to imagine
Yeah.
they're not the big fancy cabs we have now in trucks where it's a small car in the front and a
Right.
truck bed. It's
Right. So we took one of my brother's friends with us too. So there were 5 of us.
trying to cram into the front seat of
Uh-huh.
it. Wow.
Yeah,
Nobody, not everybody was going to get a seatbelt anyway.
exactly.
Might as well have you in the back.
Might as well. What's the worst that can happen?
Oh my god.
It was the 80s, you know.
Did he? Yeah. Yeah. How'd he do? Was he good?
Yeah, I mean he was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think when he first started, he was you can't really be scared and do that.
Yeah.
Like sort of sport. You
Yeah.
really have to kind of forget about your mortality and just kind of go for it.
Sure.
So I think once he kind of eased into that, we went to a couple of schools. One was I don't know if it was in Virginia or West Virginia. But we did the same thing. We put together that rig
Yeah.
and drove, and my brother did a couple of summer camps, and then we drove down to South Carolina to see some friends and then back up. I remember that trip too.
That's a long one.
That was a really long trip.
Hours and hours.
That was a 2-week trip.
How did you pass the time? Would you read?
So, not a big reader. I like to draw a lot.
Okay.
So I would draw, or I would, my parents got me a dog actually.
What kind?
It was a little Cocker Spaniel.
Okay.
And that was sort of like we're kind of dragging Amy along to all of these things, right? Every weekend is spent doing that. She needs something to do. So they got me a dog. So, I'd hang out with the dog or I'd draw or occasionally I'd read a little bit, but not big on reading. I listen to a lot of music.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what did you like in middle school music-wise?
Oh my goodness, middle school.
You
a
can
good
bleed into high school. I
question.
mean, this is
Yeah, it was kind of like Duran.
yes.
I like them. Um, that kind of genre, I guess. My brother was really big into Kiss. And so, of course, I couldn't like them because he did,
That's
right?
how that worked.
Winger was a
Yes.
big one for me. And then
She's only 17.
you got it. You know who I went to see last year at Disney?
Who's that?
Night Ranger, Sister
Nice.
Christian.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah.
You didn't go to Disney
Oh,
just to see
yeah.
them, did you?
Well, no, I was already there, but
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So Motley Crue. I listen to Motley Crue
Sure.
because every respectable Midwestern girl who lives in a small town listens to Motley Crue, right? Because
Absolutely.
they're great role models.
Yep. That's
Yeah, David Lee Roth, Van Halen, a lot of that.
cool. So you were into hair metal and you were
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
rock. Absolutely. That's
Yeah,
super cool.
yeah.
Oh, it makes me happy.
I grew up around boys. You have to I did not. I think there were two girls in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And one we didn't get along, right? And the other one was older than me, so it was a little hard for me. Like it was all boys all the time.
Did you have a best friend?
Yeah, I was a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, in elementary school until his parents got a divorce, I think when I was in middle school and he moved away.
Yeah.
But we were best friends from the time I can remember. Yeah.
That's cool. Tell me about band. Your band, the band you played in.
So band was interesting. I got into it, I want to say in 7th grade. There was no marching band in 7th or 8th grade, but I decided I wanted to play the clarinet, and so they gave me a flute. That lasted about 6 months, and then I ended up with a clarinet. So
Nice.
it all worked out, but hey. So 7th and 8th grade was really a lot of, you play a lot of concerts, a lot of like solo ensemble type things, whatever. And I remember the summer between 8th and 9th grade when marching band started, and just thinking that it was the best thing ever. Right.
Yeah.
Just fun. Like it was nice to be out. It was nice to feel like you were part of something.
Yeah.
I had a lot of confidence issues, I'd say, that were not necessarily visible. I still do, that aren't necessarily visible to people.
Yeah.
I think, if you come across as looking like you're strong, people think that you have all the confidence in the world. And I really kind of struggled to fit in. Always felt kind of awkward.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a way that like all of the other, nerds unite and we're all like my people, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, I was in cheerleading at the same time. So football games became rather interesting. So I would cheer.
Right. Oh yeah.
And then I would change.
Oh no.
And put my uniform over.
Ugh.
And then I'd march at halftime, and then usually third quarter I'd play, and then I'd change back and cheer fourth quarter.
Wow.
Truth be told, I think I was more interested in like the football players than the game, so it was okay.
When did that start for you? When did you start noticing them?
So that's interesting. I'd say probably my sophomore year of high school, and there's certainly a story that sits behind that. So it's not a good one. But it's a big part of, I think, who I am today and how I manage things. So I remember I was in 7th grade, and all within a span of about 6 months, I had one boy in science class ask me if my breasts were real and if he could touch them. In class. Yeah, pretty unbelievable, right? So I remember my reaction to that being like, wait, what? Right, because I never really
appropriate response.
Yeah, what are you talking about? And then about 2 months later, I was in my cheerleading uniform, and I had another boy grope me in the hallway, and a teacher saw it. He got in a lot of trouble. Probably would have gotten more trouble now, but the teacher saw it. Thank goodness, and she took really good care of me, and it was nice to have that advocate, right? And then I was sexually abused at that summer. So there was a boy that lived very near to where we lived, and he would wait for me to take my dog for a walk. Like we lived very near a lake, and there were a couple of access points. So I had a lot of time to myself. I used to take the dog for walks and take him swimming in the lake and hang out. There was a dock that I used to kind of hang out and meditate at, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And so I used to take my dog for a walk about every day in the summertime, and he would wait until I would leave and then follow me. And it, it started to get more awkward and more awkward. And I remember one day I was walking the dog, and he came along, and he was just being friendly, whatever.
How old is this kid?
He was probably 15.
So a couple years older than you.
Yeah, a couple years older than me. And I admit I had a crush on the kid. He was charming and cute and whatever. But we got into an area of I guess it would be a neighbor's backfield where there was like a trail that ran between kind of subdivisions, right? So I was in this area of this backfield where no one could see us.
Yeah.
And I will say that it wasn't violent, but it was a definite no,
Yeah.
that was not heard. And so what that does, I've learned just through sort of self discovery, for years. It had a big impact for years and years on how I viewed myself in relationships and kind of how I needed to approach it and whatnot. But that went on for quite a while. It
So
went
it
on for a
wasn't
few
a
years.
one-time thing.
It was not. No, it was not. And I don't think I think I've maybe told two people about that. I mean, my family doesn't even know. I was very ashamed and embarrassed and
Wow.
felt like it was my fault because I shouldn't have put myself in that position. And now that I think about it, I'm like, well, I was really just walking my dog,
Yeah.
and to have this kind of happen. Now, I will tell you that a couple years ago, this person tried to reconnect with me. Um, and he flat out asked me if I felt like it was that. And I said yes. And he offered up a very, very sincere apology. So it's nice. Like, to me, it has the happiest ending that it could, in
Sure.
that he apologized. I feel it was sincere because if it wasn't, he wouldn't have asked. And I really think it's because he has two girls, three daughters, actually. He's three daughters that are all teenagers about that age when he was taking advantage of me.
That's a huge question to ask.
Yes.
I mean, to have the stones to actually say that out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm sure you're right. That's not
Yeah.
something he would have just haphazardly asked.
Yeah. And 10 years ago, I probably would have, been very angry and approached it differently. But, now I think I appreciate the apology. I appreciate the fact that he knew that he did wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not bitter about the impact it had because it's all led me to kind of where I am now. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. And it would be things like he would wait for my parents to leave. My parents bought a cottage in northern Michigan, and he'd wait for them to leave. And then he'd come over and,
Yeah.
and then he'd leave and go on a date with a girl. I mean, and so that stuff really, it messes with your self-confidence. And I remember a low point when I was in I was probably in 8th grade at the time, where like I had such little self-confidence and I was home by myself. And again, I don't blame anybody for it. I mean, the fact that I didn't tell my parents is a weird thing.
And the fact that they didn't figure out somehow in there.
No, because I think I just, I kind of just have a way to mask it. Does that make sense? Like I can just act like everything's normal,
Yeah.
right, in their eyes, and that I don't think there's any way for them to kind of see it or know what was going on. The biggest problem is, it was a very good friend of my brother's, and so it was the same boy that we took to Oklahoma.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, and he so he's dating other people and stuff. So it never even was given the trappings of being a relationship.
Exactly.
Wow.
So when I would start dating boys, he would call or come over or whatever, and play a game of well, I kind of want to date you, and I want to go out with you and whatnot, right? To just kind of mess things up. So I remember when my first husband asked me to marry him, he found out. I would imagine through family or my brother or whatever, and he found out, and he called me about a month after and said something along the lines of, you can't marry him. I want to marry you. I'm going to send you an engagement ring, blah, blah, blah. And it sounds really odd. And when I say it out loud, it's really bizarre. But I was like, no, thank you. This is one relationship that you're not going to you're not going to mess up for me. And I had just started to kind of get my head back on straight. Because again, it messes with your sense of everything.
You said it sounds odd. Why does that sound odd to you?
Because I'm not sure. And I still don't feel like if I told people that it sounds believable enough. Like there's something weird, like kind of going on.
Mm-hmm.
That it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound believable. But the fact that the man figured it out and offered up an apology a couple years ago, because I'm not the only one that it happened to. I found out years later that like two of my best friends had the same experience, and it was all going on at the same time.
With him?
Mm-hmm. The same boy.
Gosh.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm so sorry.
So way to be a downer, huh?
No, this is stories. This is real.
Yeah.
So
when I say like I started to sort of notice the boys on the football team, I was much older, probably a sophomore in high school before I felt like I was, worthy enough to have somebody take notice for something other than that. And again, think about that. I mean, you know how old your children are.
So, and you said it went on for years. I mean, did it stop in high school? Did it stop?
No, he moved away, and that's when it stopped.
Okay.
He left and moved away.
And how old were you at the time, roughly?
Gosh, I want to say I was probably 16 or 17.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it was years.
Mm-hmm.
Years.
Yeah. Yep.
That has a way of confusing so many things, but when you do naturally feel a physical attraction to somebody else, and then having that confused with what was done to you,
yes,
and going, I don't know that I like this feeling. I don't know that I'm supposed to like this feeling. Did I like it when it was done to me?
Is it the only thing that's normal? Is it all like that?
Yeah.
Is that how it's supposed to be?
Right.
You don't really kind of know the difference between what your self-worth is and where to draw the line in terms of how people... You don't set a standard for how people should treat you.
Yes.
So I had no standard for how I should be treated for a very, very long time.
So when were you able to engage romantically with someone for the first time on your terms?
It's an interesting question. I'll be honest and say I'm not really sure that I can pinpoint that or say that that's ever happened in a guilt-free kind of way.
Yeah.
I met my ex-husband when I just turned 19. And one thing about me is I don't do things in small movements. Which because of the way we met each other, right? Like you're getting ready to photograph my wedding to my second husband while I'm 5 months pregnant in a new state with
right.
with two young boys, right? Like I don't do things kind of in between. I don't do
all
things in increments, right?
Yeah.
It's all in or nothing. So I remember in that week I broke up with my boyfriend. He had proposed to me, and I said no, thank you. I mean, I was still in high school. I was 18 years old in high school.
Was he sweet and innocent?
Oh my gosh, and still is.
And did you break his heart?
I did. I did. And then my poor brother moved in with him like 6 months later, and
oh no.
Oh yeah, it was small town life.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally broke his heart. I think I broke his grandma's heart more because her and I were like really, really good buddies. Yeah, just the nicest boy. Still is just the nicest boy. But I'm also really bad at goodbyes. So like I picked the phone up one morning and I said, you know what? I don't think I want to date you anymore. And so I think I'm done. And so have a really nice life.
Oh.
Heartless. Because I didn't know. Like, I don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I still remember the day. And then I had hair about as long as I do now, so very long hair. I got it all cut off, very, very short. Turned 18 and met my first future husband.
What we should name him something, so that for his sake, and unless you want to
Oh,
name him,
yeah. No, that's good.
would you want to call him Larry?
Larry's good.
All right, we'll call your first name. How'd you meet Larry?
Okay, so I met Larry. My life's also a series of coincidences, both in good and bad ways. I was going out with a girlfriend. We knew some bouncers at a bar in Flint, and so we were going to go see if we could get in. I had to stop downtown Lapeer, Michigan, for it was the closest big town with a drugstore. So I had to stop and get some lipstick because I had to get my lipstick on so we could, get our way into the bar.
Bright red, I assume.
Yeah, in Flint. What could go wrong,
Yeah.
right? So we go, and there was a big thing in Lapeer that was cruising. I don't know if that exists down here or not.
Oh, yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Used to.
Yeah, it was big in Lapeer.
Yeah.
Big, like all the way from my parents, right, to like when we grew up. So it was basically just a bunch of friends. We drove around and acted silly. There was not. I mean, it was very innocent. There was no drinking, no drugs. It wasn't anything like that.
Right.
It was just us being silly, right?
It's like American Graffiti.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Just hanging out,
Just
riding in
chilling
a
out.
car in a circle.
Yeah, and then you'd occasionally watch the testosterone get too much over a girl, and
Sure.
there'd be a decent fight, and
Yep.
you'd stop and watch it, and then carry on. So I was driving down Main Street in Lapeer, Michigan, and my husband drove up in his car, and I remember saying to my girlfriend, "Nice mama's car." Like, right? It's no ways his because it's new, and
Way too
he was,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and admittedly, I was driving my mom's car at the time, so it was a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
So we stopped at a stop light, and I rolled my window down, and I looked at my girlfriend, and I said, "He's really cute."
Yeah.
And he rolled his window down, and I think we both said hey to each other, whatever. And I pulled over in the post office parking lot, and he did too. And so he goes, "What are you guys doing?" Total stranger danger, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go to a bar. Like, we're 18. We're going to go to a bar. So he said, "Well, can I go?" Right? Okay. Well, I have to go home, and let me go home and change, and then you can drive. That way it's not, right, like weird.
Right.
Okay. So drive to his house, and his whole family's there. His mom, two of his brothers, his uncle, his grandfather, and his aunt, and his little cousin are all there.
Wow. So his whole family was there.
Family was there.
Wow. So you got to meet the family right off the bat.
2 seconds in.
Wow.
And I don't know, there was something there. Like we didn't end up by going to the bar because we couldn't get in. I dropped my girlfriend off at her house, and Tyler, true story, I saw that man every day for the next 6 years after that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. It was on a Friday night, and I said, "I'll see you, next week, whatever. I'll call you, whatever." And the next day I came home from shopping, and he was in my driveway. The problem is no one knew that I broke up with my other boyfriend yet. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say I'll go all the way back to your question. I would say that I'm not sure really when the first, what I thought was sort of a real romantic, take your time and fall in love story.
Yeah.
Kind of happened for me. And, because it was just such a spark there
Yeah.
with Larry,
Yeah.
and so we dated for 4 or 5 years and moved in together and lived together for a couple of years, got married and whatnot. I'd say if anything, my current husband, he and I were friends. We knew each other for a while, and it sort of just turned into something.
Yeah.
Which was really, really refreshing. Really
Nice change of pace, huh?
very nice change of pace. Yeah.
When did you went to college?
I did. I went to community college,
Okay.
2 different community colleges. Took me 8 years to get my associate's degree.
Oh my goodness.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing.
And
at
yes, no, you should.
I mean, I am kind of, but-
absolutely. So the weird thing is, I got into this job, and like, I was making really good money.
Yeah. That's not weird. I get that.
And I was 19 when I bought my first house. So I had
Oh,
a
wow.
mortgage,
Yeah.
and and my ex and I, we weren't quite married yet, but we had 2 car payments.
Yeah.
And we were making, like, I was making really good money, and we were both going to school at
Do you
night.
remember how much you were making? This is fun
Yeah,
for
yeah,
inflation
yeah.
purposes.
$8.50 an hour. That was
Boom.
considered, well, but 3.35 was an
Yeah.
hour was minimum wage, right?
Yeah.
So 8.50 an hour is enough to buy, like, we bought this really crappy house in Pontiac, Michigan for 40 grand. Oh, it was so bad. We went downstairs instead of having insulation, they had old underwear and t-shirts that they shoved in around, yeah, for insulation. It was that kind of house.
Oh,
It
wow.
was
And that's in
nasty.
Michigan, and you
Yeah.
need insulation
Yeah.
in Michigan.
Not that kind though. So so we kind of got into, I guess, the house flipping business, they would call it
Yeah.
now. So we lived there for about 18 months, sold it, bought another house, lived there 3 years, I think,
Yep.
and doubled.
Nice.
Yeah, and then moved into, like, I was 26 years old and lived in a very big, very nice house at the time because we were able to.
Yeah.
And then the .com came along, and we and I was involved in that
Yeah.
in a very good way. I never kind of got burned by all of that, but yeah, it took me 8 years to get my associate's degree. I ended up by getting a fine arts degree.
Nice.
And I remember just getting it in the mail and saying to my ex-husband, like, look, I graduated. I don't know when that happened, but I must have done it. Look, it's a true story. So I went back to school when I was 43.
Oh, okay.
And I have a bachelor's in business administration.
So, at what point did your boys come along?
So we had Larry and I kind of had an agreement when we got married that sort of we would have things in order by the time we were, me 26, him 28, to
Yeah.
start a family. We moved into this really nice home. Larry's grandfather was just an amazing man. Very big impact on me. Very big impact. So he was in construction, and he owned his own construction company for a long time. And I tell you this because that's kind of how we made money selling the houses.
Right.
So he showed us how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's why I can tile a backsplash like no one's business, right? Anyway, we moved in this house, and he helped us. Kind of showed us how to do things, and he was all about love equals work.
Mm.
So love is not about buying somebody something. Love is not about speaking words. Love is about things that you do for people to show that you appreciate them. So that man made me more like mantles and like cupolas for my garages.
Wow.
And bookshelves and just all of this stuff because it was his way of showing you that he loved you.
Yeah.
So we finished the house that we were working on, and I remember having a very difficult conversation with Larry about we kind of made this plan, and I'm a little bit funny about that, right? Admittedly, so I was a bit too rigid about it in hindsight, and I'm like, and now here we are, and so what are we doing? I'm not saying we've got to have kids now, but you really need to think about it because that's our next stage in life.
Right.
And so he agreed.
Mm-hmm.
He had stopped and thought about it, and all the things that you kind of have to give up and whatnot. Yeah. And I think he was just afraid because he had a difficult relationship with his parents. So Aiden came along. He was born in '99, so just before Y2K.
Yeah.
Yeah, just before the Y2K
when
panic.
The world ended.
Yeah, exactly. As I was sitting in my father-in-law's basement with all of his apocalyptic canned goods in the other room. It all ended.
Oh, I love it.
Amazing, right?
Best.
Yeah. So there's a picture of me, actually. I've got a Happy New Year, like a little tiara on, holding Aiden when he's like 3 months old. Like, it's the end of the world.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, he came along, and then 16 months later, Liam was born.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, they are really close.
they are. And I remember it being really hard because I wanted to stay home. I
Yeah.
wanted to stay home. And there were all these outside influences in my life. Like, I had a pretty successful career,
What were you
and
doing?
I was working for a digital advertising
Okay.
company,
Yeah.
in automotive, of course. Southeast Michigan automotive,
Yeah.
everything pretty
Everything.
much fits in there. But I was doing that, and I really wanted to stay home. I remember every Monday I would cry myself all the way to work, and then I'd wait to put my mascara on. I'd do it at work. And it just turned into a thing. It turned into well, if you quit, then you have to give up this and this and this and this and this. And it became more and more about possessions. And, I wanted it all. And I've driven some of the nicest brand vehicles ever created. I think at the time we had two BMWs and an RX-8 in the garage along with his company
I was
car.
gonna say
And
those aren't American made.
no, no, which is a whole other thing. That's right. So, and they weren't the cheap ones. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, very lavish vacations, all of that kind of stuff. But it really wore on me, and I became somebody that I didn't recognize. I
Yeah.
mean, the neighborhood that I lived in was phenomenal, and I still talk to a few of the neighbors. We were very close, but it was kind of funny because the neighbor bought these like planters, like flower planters,
Mm-hmm.
and she put them on the front porch. And then we were all like, the rest of us were like, those are nice. So then I see another one pop up. They're a little bigger, a little fancier. Another one pops up, and then I'm like, okay, game on, right? So I get the biggest, most obnoxious. Oh yeah, of course, right? And I put them right out front.
You were having a planter
It
measuring
it
contest.
it it kind of was,
Yeah.
yeah. And then this person put blinds up in their garage window. This person put curtains up. I went and bought like silk, like ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And all real, truly all in fun because wonderful people. But it you have to think about like that's kind of where I was wrapped up in, and that's where my world was, and it's not where I came from, and it's not how I was raised. I always had to chase something to make people proud of me and
Mm.
to fit in and to feel good enough.
Mm.
And then that's when Larry decided to get a girlfriend. Um,
Oh.
mhm. And i- it's sort of a profound thing. It was a downward spiral for me. It was 18 months of being very depressed, and I wanted to save the marriage. And so we went to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing all in one week. I was doing individual therapy, he was doing individual therapy, and we were doing marriage counseling all in one week.
It's
I
heavy.
cannot tell you how draining that is. And I was not in a mental state to be able to afford myself the luxury really to work through it myself.
Yeah.
I was trying to take care of the two
I was gonna
kids.
say two little boys.
Yep, and I had at the time I was advertising executive at the time, so I had made it up to vice president, and it was just one of those things that, in hindsight, it's really weird. In hindsight, I realized that unconsciously I would drive around neighborhoods on my way home from work and think about what it would be like if it were just the boys and I living in one of the houses. So, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy for lots of reasons that I won't go into. I was very lonely
Mm-hmm.
outside of the boys, right? But just romantically and personally, I was very lonely in that relationship. And it hit me. And I could remember everything. It was so traumatic. I could remember everything about it, the sounds and the smells and whatever, and exactly how I felt when he told me that it was going on. And um, I went to therapy, and I remember sitting back in my chair, and I went, "Huh?" And she said, "Well, what is it?"
Yeah.
And I said, "He doesn't love me. It's not me. It's the idea of me. He wants to stay with me because um, of lots of reasons that have nothing to do with me."
Mm.
And it was a very weird defining moment for who I am now.
Yeah.
In other words, it has nothing to do with me. And I will tell you that I did not leave because of the affair. And everybody thinks that that's the case. Everybody who knows me thinks that's why. That's not why. It was the lies and the ongoing lies and the inability to trust. And I was really punishing that man for that.
Yeah.
Really beating the crap out of him every day. And it's a weird thing because a lot of people called me bitter after that and whatnot because I was angry for a good amount of time. But honestly, I did it because I can't keep beating the crap out of somebody because they made a mistake. And if I don't feel like you're going to be truthful with me moving forward, it's not something I want to stay in, and it's not something I want to do.
Yeah.
But it's a big moment to sit your very young children down and tell them that you're splitting up and you're moving. So we moved across town, oddly enough, to one of the houses that I had been looking at 2 years before and thought, my God, that house is so cute. And why can't I just give up this lifestyle? I want to give up this lifestyle. I don't want to worry about the fact that my hair's not perfect or my nails aren't just right or I bought the wrong dress for this occasion, right? Or I'm not skinny enough or whatever the case, fill in the blank. I want to break from it.
Yeah.
So we moved, and it was both older boys and I. We lived there for 3 years. I'd never been laid off ever. Been fired a couple times. And I admit that I deserved it. I've been fired a couple times, and you know what they say, you haven't lived till you've been fired.
Heck yeah.
But I'd never been laid off. So I was working for a company that lost the account I was on after 90 years. They had the account for 90 years.
Oh my
and
gosh.
they lost it. Yeah. So obviously, no client, no job.
Yeah, sorry.
Single mom with a mortgage, a couple car payments. I freaked out for about 20 minutes.
Yep.
And at this time, Derek and I were dating, but we were not like, he still had his house. I had a house. Like, we were not talking marriage or anything. And so I freaked out for 20 minutes about that. I called him. I'm like, I just lost my job. I don't know what to do, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, well, go home. And when I get off work, I'll come over. I'm like, okay. And then on the drive home, I was like, oh my God, I'm so relieved. I'm so, like, all of this pressure. I have no idea how I'm going to pay for it. But you know what? All this pressure is off of me. And I mean, it was 60, 70 hours. I'd come home, put the kids to bed and do homework. And then I'd get back on until 2 a.m. Then I'd get up, get them to school. And then I get to, right.
Right.
And I had nobody around me. There was nobody around me. I didn't live anywhere near my family.
Right.
My ex's family, like, I was dead to them the second I walked out. So, I mean, I had nobody but me. And that amount of pressure over 3 years just becomes something. So I was like, well, I have some retirement money. So I went home and punched some numbers. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I got to sell my house and my car. Like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I took 5 months off. I took 5 months off to figure out what I wanted to do. I walked my kids to school every single day. I
Yep.
walked my dogs with me. I went sailing every weekend with Derek.
That's awesome.
I have not ever been that fit or that tan or that happy in my life. But I consulted for a little bit. About 5 months in, I'm like, well, I guess I should probably like be responsible and get back to work. So I had a friend call me and said, we're launching this electric vehicle. Do you want to come down? And I was like, sure. So I remember calling Derek and I said, hey, you want to move to Tennessee and get married and maybe have a couple kids? And he was like, sure. So I said, all right, we better go to Nashville because I just accepted a job.
You don't get to pick where in Tennessee.
No. And we better make sure we like it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I almost chickened out, admittedly, and my parents came down and it was just, I was trying to sign this lease for a rental house. And my dad was like, listen up. 20 years ago, I had the option to come down and work for Saturn and I chickened out.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do it. What are you going to lose? So it was a nice moment between Dad and I to, after so many years of that inner turmoil between the two of us.
Yeah.
So literally put the older boys in on a plane, and we came down and we moved down. Just me and them, because Derek stayed up for about a year.
To finish things up there. And...
Yeah, his father passed away, so the weekend
Oh,
he moved
goodness.
me down here officially. His father passed away that Monday.
Oh my goodness, that's a
Yeah,
heavy weekend too.
yeah, it's pretty awful. It's Thanksgiving weekend of 2009. Yeah, it's pretty awful. Really awful.
The one thing I want to come back to.
Hmm.
You mentioned a conversation with your dad toward the end of your marriage to Larry.
Hmm.
Tell me about that.
I think that you hear growing up, you're going to become your parents, you're going to become your parents, and you're always the kid that's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm nothing like my parents.
Yeah.
And then you grow up and you're like, yep, I am.
Yeah.
And you realize that you appreciate that, if the good aspects of that, right? And you work
Absolutely.
on the aspects that you thought weren't so great.
Yep.
So my dad and I were very much alike. And I realize that now. So we didn't get along very well at all. I was very, we'll say, private, but as a kid, I just kind of liked to do what I like to do, and I was in a lot of trouble. I never did drugs. I'm one of those people, I can honestly say, outside of prescription drugs that were for me,
Sure.
I have never done any drug in my life. So, putting that into context, like, I just always felt like, why are you hassling me? Right? Well, he was just trying to be a dad
Yeah.
and do the best he could being a dad. And at the time, you don't appreciate that. So it turns into a bit of a conflict. We weren't close. I was very, very close with my mom.
Okay.
Very close with my mom. And I always took her side with everything. And I never thought about kind of the struggles that my dad had, both with the fact that the man went to a job that he did not like for 37 years so that he could retire early and live his life. Think about that for a minute, right? To provide for his family and whatnot. And I was always grateful for everything that I had. It wasn't that. It was just, you don't have an understanding of that when you're little.
Yeah.
So I was up they had bought a house in northern Michigan, and they they bought a piece of property and they built a house on it. And I remember going up as I was kind of at the beginning stages of my divorce, and we were starting to have an argument, and I said, Dad, Larry made a quite profound statement that he thinks that you're ashamed of me because we're getting a divorce, and nobody else in the family really, other than one of my uncles, has ever gotten a divorce. It's just something that you didn't do.
Right.
So he thinks that you're very ashamed of me, and I just need someone to advocate for me. And so my dad said, let's wait till everyone goes to bed. Then you and I will have a drink, have an adult beverage, and we'll talk about it. Okay, seems fair. Well, I went into it defensive. He went into it defensive. And it ended up at 4 o'clock in the morning, just both of us in tears. And after about a decade of battling with each other, it really just, it was nice.
Yeah.
He was diagnosed with cancer a couple years before, throat cancer. And I remember just instinctively, I call him every day. And he didn't want to talk to me because he was grumpy because he just had radiation or he wasn't feeling well or whatever, right? And I call him every day. And even if my mom answered, I'm like, just tell him I'm, house today, whatever, to get through it. And I remember him saying to me, I don't know why you called me every day. And I don't think I did a good enough job raising you. And I wish that I could change things. And I just remember that being so amazing because I just never kind of thought of my dad like that. I just really thought that we didn't like each other and, we weren't going to get past it. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, you never shared anything, Dad. Like, you never talked to me. So we talked about the war a little bit and we had some really good laughs because he had some funny stories, believe it or not, out of it. But there were a lot of tears and, And it was good. And so it's interesting because I just got a text from him on my way over here that his strawberries are ripe, and he took a picture with his phone of 2 bowls of strawberries and sent it to me.
Excellent.
Right. So it sounds really silly, and maybe that's normal for people, but for me, I'm glad that we were able to resolve that
Yeah.
before, while he's still around, and we're very far away from each other, so it's difficult. We don't it's not like they call me every day and I don't call them every day or whatever, but it's just nice to know that if I need something, I can pick the phone up and they'll come.
Yeah.
And I never felt secure like that. So, or advocated for like that, kind of, I don't know. I guess it was just me, but I never felt like that. And it's nice. It's a very secure, nice feeling.
Amy, what are you afraid of?
What am I afraid of? I am afraid that other people will have to depend. No, let me back that up. I am afraid that I will have to depend on other people.
Why is that?
I think during my life, I have been incredibly disappointed by any time that I've had to depend on somebody or wanted someone to advocate for me and they really didn't. And so it's a huge fear of mine. I want to be the person that is in charge of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to depend on other people. I have a hard time calling somebody if I need a favor for something. Always been that way. And it scares me to think that I'd have to ask somebody for something.
What do you regret?
Oh, that's a better question too. That's a good one too. What do I regret? Nothing. I don't regret anything. I made some really big mistakes in my life. I've been in some really awkward situations in my life. I've done very mean things to other people in my life. I have had great joy and I've had great sadness. But honestly, nothing. I don't regret anything.
Who is God?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Can I tell a story?
Absolutely.
All right. Here is my relationship with God. Not a particularly religious family growing up. Yes, people got married in churches.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we would go every once in a while, but not particularly religious. When I was 11, 12, I decided that I was going to go on some sort of call it a pilgrimage to figure out how I felt about it.
Okay.
What spawned that was I was sitting in the back of a church with one of my friends, and I started to question it.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to question everything. And I started to separate that's really good moral advice and really sound advice and a really good message for life versus the Bible says this is my interpretation and whatnot. And I started to question everything. Okay, well, let's go find a religion that I fit into. So my poor mother probably thought I was nuts. She probably still does. But I would go to you name it, and I've been there. If it was in my geographic area growing up.
At 11 or 12 you did this?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Because I was determined that was something that was missing from my life. And I couldn't sit in the back of a church and question. I felt like a real hypocrite because we did like a lot of my friends were really religious. So that's who I used to go with. Like we do like, I don't know, Bible camp, I guess they call it, right? Where the preteens would go and you'd have little dances and you'd do whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, God, I cannot sit here. I feel like such a hypocrite. It's awful. So after that little exploration, shall we say, I had a lot of time to think about it. So I'd go to the bookstore and I'd buy books, and I read the Bible that my mom gave me probably 8 times.
Wow.
And I couldn't get my head around it. So I spent maybe the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, really, really digging into it because I didn't know what to call it, and I still don't. Um, I'm very spiritual, and I am not religious. And those two, you have to kind of learn the difference between what those two things are, right?
Hmm.
I very much believe in what you would call an earth based belief.
Okay.
So I certainly believe that the universe is a living, breathing thing. I appreciate everything that's all the gifts that are given us on this earth. I think it's all an incredible miracle. I just don't believe that there is a God a single God as we define it.
Yeah.
Overall, I see a lot of good that happens from organized religion, and I see a lot of bad that happens from organized religion. And for me, I have to believe that the universe did not randomly explode from nothing,
Hmm.
and that it is living, breathing, has a heartbeat, has a soul. I think that every living person has a soul, and I think that it's immortal. And I fully believe that if you want to come back, that choice is up to you. So you can come back as much as you want, but when you decide that you're done, that's your decision to make.
Excellent.
Not the answer you were
No,
expecting.
there's really not an answer I'm expecting. That's the fun part about these
Uh,
questions is they're open ended.
well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, and thank you um, for being so real. I appreciate it.
Of course.
I try not to force people to circle back in their stories because typically there's a natural rhythm to telling a story. And when someone has moved on, it's because they've moved on, because they don't want to circle back. But man, oh man, am I glad we circled back to that kitchen table in Michigan. I'm getting to be a weepy mess, and it's this show's fault. This show has caused me to cry a lot more than I used to. So, if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to know what Amy looks like, you can find out by going to our website. It is butenoughAbout.me. That's www.butenoughAbout.me. Or you can go to the social networks, facebook.com/butenoughaboutmepodcast or instagram.com/butenoughaboutmepodcast. Follow us there. I try to update those more often than I post podcast episodes. Follow us there. It's always a good time. I love hearing from you guys. Also, recently, I asked for and received photos from some of you of places that you have put those awesome vinyl stickers we've got. If you would like to be one of the super, super cool and elect people, very few actually have this sticker. I'd call it limited edition, but it's limited only by my wallet. So if you want one of these stickers, give me a shout. Send me a text message if you know my number, or go through the website, send me an email, tyler@butenoughAbout.me. You could do it through the social networks, anywhere you want to. Hit me up. I will mail you one of the stickers for free. Costs you nothing. Just stick it somewhere and take a picture and share it with us so that we can get the word out. Which brings me to another really important point. Guys, if you like this, if you want more of this, I need you to help spread the word. There is no way I could shout about it anymore and have people still be my friend. I talk about this show all the time because this is so stinking much fun for me to do and to hear responses from some of you back. So if you know people who like listening to stories, if you know people who like listening to podcasts, if you know people who like people, please, please turn them on to the show. Tell them about the podcast. Help them find it. The only way this thing is going to grow is if you guys talk about it. There's no budget to the show. I don't make money doing this, so it's not like I can reinvest into marketing and things like that. The show's logo and also the sticker, incidentally, came from my good friend, Mr. Casey Jones. You can see his work at iamcaseyjones.com. The bumper music comes from my good friend, Mr. Jace Hackman. You can hear his work at jacehackman.com. That's JaseHackman.com. If you or someone you know wants to tell me their story, I want to hear it. I try not to be obnoxious in tracking people down because I figure if people want to tell me their story, they'll let me know. But I would love, love, love to hear your stories. So if you or someone you know has a story that's worth hearing, which everybody's story is worth hearing, drop me a line, tyler@butenoughabout.me, or on one of the socials. I'm going to take a moment here at the end of the episode when nobody's listening anymore to give you a little bit of detail. There's a quote that I guarantee you've heard: be kind to one another, for each man is fighting a secret battle. I did a little research into that because that felt so resonant to a lot of what I do in this podcast, and I found that that is not actually a real quote from a real person. The quote comes from a person by the name of Ian McLaren, who is not actually a real person. It was apparently the pen name for another person. But the real writer, John Watson, wrote a slightly longer version in something else in 1903. He said, "This man beside us also has a hard fight with an unfavoring world, with strong temptations, with doubts and fears, with wounds of the past which have skinned over, but which smart when they are touched. It is a fact, however surprising. And when this occurs to us, we are moved to deal kindly with him, to bid him to be of good cheer, to let him understand that we are also fighting a battle. We are bound not to irritate him, nor press hardly upon him, nor help his lower self." If there could be a mission statement for this podcast, I think that's it. Guys, be kind to one another. You have an assignment in the next 2 weeks. Go buy someone a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey or a sparkling water, whatever it is they like, and ask them to tell you their story. My name is Tyler Andrews, but enough about me.